Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I am Tyrone Wilson. I'm here today with Tanya Janca, aka SheHacksPurple, for the DC Cybersecurity Professionals Meetup. Today is January 29th. We are going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to hear from Tanya, and then after we hear from Tanya, we're going to have a little one-on-one and, get to know her a little bit. So, by all means, if anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to use the chat and we will get those questions in to Tanya and then we'll have some, free flowing dialogue. All right. So, again, with that being said, welcome you. It's Tanya Janca.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am going to share my slides so they're full screen now, and hopefully you see a great big screen of secure design. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about basically 8 concepts that can apply to all sorts of situations, especially custom applications or when you're designing a network or any sort of system that is technology based. They also apply quite often to like a building or your house or other types of systems that you don't even really think about for security. And so we're going to talk about each one. I'm going to explain what it is. I'm going to tell you a way that it could apply in real life. And then I would like some of you to tell me where you've seen it or where you feel that it could be added or other ways that we could use it. And the purpose of this is that, one, I don't know everything. And two, like the more discussion we have and the more we look at it from different angles, the more likely it is that you'll learn it and then be able to apply it later. And so I do a whole bunch of things. Actually, let's do the next slide. So this is the About Me slide. So I'm the CEO and founder at SheHacksPurple, an online community, podcast, and academy where we teach people how to make secure software. I'm known as SheHacksPurple, and some of my hair is purple. I wrote a book, Alice and Bob Learn AppSec. I'm an advisor at a company called NeuroLegion. This summer, so I'm not 25 years in tech technically till July of this summer, but that's a while. I do stuff on the internet. I'm a nerd at large on the internet. Like, I know with COVID, we're not going to a lot of parties, but whenever I end up sort of meeting a new person and they don't work in tech and they don't know me and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm kind of one of those like nerds on the internet that writes blogs and stuff because it's really hard to describe the weird things that I do. But basically, I'm just really passionate about people building more secure software. And I met Tyrone and I had him on my podcast. And he talked about like all the cool teachings he does. He talked about like this community and this meetup. And I was like, oh, you're looking for guests? Oh, hi, what about me? And so I was really glad that he said yes. Okay, so if you're at this meetup, you already care about security. And I always talk about software and how we can secure it. But these lessons actually apply to all sorts of different areas of IT. And again, like I said, sometimes the physical domain. So security, we Tyrone and I both work in cybersecurity, but there's physical security. There's all sorts of types of ways that applies to things. And so I always focus on software developers and how they are the first line of defense because they're building the things. But all of you that work anywhere in IT, like when you're building your network, when you're deciding, how to call an API or to not call it, like all of those things is you helping to defend our systems or not, right? Or opening them. And so without your buy-in, we can't do this. And so we're going to learn some best practices. I really like Star Trek. And so my friend made this for me. He's like, if you say what you do for a living and then you say, for the glory of the empire after, he's like, it sounds cooler. And so for me, it's application security for the glory of the empire. And like, when you say it like that, it's like, yeah, your job's pretty cool. Anyway, so this is what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to show you the list and you don't have to memorize the list because then we're going to go through each one of them one at a time. But so we're going to cover assume breach and zero trust, defense in depth, least privilege, supply chain security, security by obscurity, attack surface reduction, and then usable security, which is the one a lot of us forget sometimes. I feel it's quite important. If there are questions at some point, Tyrone, if you could verbally interrupt me, because I can't see them because my slides are full screen. And so if there is something, please feel free. If someone has like an awesome question or comment. So a thing that I'll probably do is like go in and out of my slides so that I can hear the back and forth, because I really want to hear what all of you have to say. This isn't Tanya talking at you. This is going to be Tanya starting a discussion. So we're actually going to do the first two together, assume breach and zero trust, because they go hand in hand a lot. So first of all, what the heck does assume breach mean? So you're like, does it mean we assume that we have been breached or might be breached someday? Yes. But it means designing and planning and reacting as though you already have been breached or you will be someday. So when you react to something, you react as though you have been breached. So a really good example that I saw of this, I saw a talk by one of the AppSec people from that place that rents out rooms in your house really successfully. Oh my gosh, Airbnb. For a second, I'm like, what? So the guy from Airbnb was explaining, whenever we have a vulnerability reported that is basically something that could be exploited, we go and we launch our incident response process immediately, and we go verify to see if it has previously been exploited ever, so that we can go clean up that mess. Because the bug hunter or security researcher that found it, they reported it to us. That person's awesome. We're going to, give them a bounty and thank them. But what if they're the fifth person that found it and not the first person, and the other 4 people did something bad with it? We don't know. And so we go and we investigate. Assume breach could mean the way that you plan out your network or your application. So actually, let's go into zero trust so I can explain how the zero trust design is an assume breach design. So zero trust means there's no implicit trust anymore in any of our systems. So we don't implicitly trust between components, apps, network systems, and sometimes even within your own app. So what does that mean? So what we used to do is we would design networks, and it would be like, hey, you like log in to the network, and it's like, oh, well, you logged in, so you're probably cool. What's up? And we just let you go wherever you wanted. That's called a flat network, where there's no firewalls, there's no restrictions. You just got to go do everything. That was a long time ago. That was like when I started doing teaching, or when I started learning, and I was in college or high school doing computer science. So then they're like, it turns out not everyone's really nice. Maybe what we should do is we should put firewalls between different systems, and we called this zoning. And so let's say, someone, you let them on your network, and you're like, you're allowed in like the public access zone. So we've got stuff that is publicly available here, but then there's firewalls. So you can't get to where the databases are, and you can't get to where the applications live. You couldn't get to those other places. But if you're in, like, let's say the data access zone, you could go to every single database and every single, like, you're in, they're like, this person's probably a DBA. We could probably trust them. And so what would happen if if you are a penetration tester or a malicious actor, when I was a pen tester, I would call it pivoting. So I was always like a web app pen tester and not very good at network stuff, and that's okay. But basically, like, you would manage to get past defenses, you would get into a zone, and you're like, cool, I can go to any server I want in here, and you would jump around and see all the different stuff. And that's called pivoting, trying to get to different places. And so, it turns out that, like, there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily very nice. And if we let someone in to see, let's say, server A, maybe they don't need to see server B, C, and D. And like, maybe they should never be allowed to see it. So then zero trust came along, and zero trust is like, okay, we have this database server. This database server has, 3 APIs that are supposed to call it, and that's it. nothing else should be allowed to talk to it unless you are actually the database administrator. So if you're the database administrator, you can log in, you have to have 2FA, you have to do all this stuff, prove you're you, right? That person's allowed in. And then those 3 APIs, that means you close all the other ports. It means that everyone else is blocked from contacting you. It means that basically there's like a firewall force field around you. No one else is allowed in except for the DBA after jumping through all the hoops, or those APIs, again, having to probably authenticate and authorize so you know who you're talking to and that they are on the good list and they're allowed in. And so all of that together would be zero trust. Like right now, there's 65,000 ports. Most people just leave them all open. And why, right? So the idea of zero trust is by default, you deny everything and you only open things up if you know you can trust that person. And so us designing a zero trust network is us assuming there's going to be a breach someday. I hope that makes sense now. And so I'm wondering, so I'm just going to X this out of there. And oh, good, there's some comments. So what other ways? Oh, hi, Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So if you are understanding these concepts, what would be an idea or a way that you think that you could apply this where you work, either assume breach or zero trust? What are ways that we could potentially apply this, either in our lives or somewhere else, right? Right now in Canada, if you want to go to a restaurant, you have to show a QR code that says, that you've had a COVID vaccine and you've had 2 of them. And soon it's going to say you have to have 3 of them. And we were doing that for a while. But then people were just sharing those with other people. And, it'd be me and it's your name Tyrone? And it's yes. And so then they made you show ID and they had to match. And they did that because they assumed breach, because it turned out thousands of people really don't want a vaccine, but they still want to go to a pub or a restaurant, etc. And so they did that as a second security precaution, specifically because they're assuming that because they knew that there was breach, but then now they're assuming breach. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add? I see a comment, food afternoon, everyone. I like that. I know it's supposed to say good, but maybe we should say food. I like food. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I appreciate you coming. Does anyone want to share some ideas or places? So G. Voden saying, there's a new concept called self-sovereign identity. Ooh, that sounds like it might be related. I feel like this type of design can be applied anywhere. So for instance, sometimes if you're designing a web app or some sort of technical system, there's another comment from him, but I can't see it. Okay. Oh, okay. So self-sovereign identity is about decentralizing identity based on blockchain. Yeah, I feel that having our identity managed by the government, it's not always perfect. I live in Canada, and sometimes our government makes mistakes. I am living through one right now where they're like, you didn't pay this tax. I'm like, no, I did. Here's evidence. And they're like, well, that's going to take us 6 months to go through. So you have to give us $20,000 now. So I had to do that a few months ago. And they said it's going to take 6 to 12 months to give it back to me, even though I have evidence I paid it years ago. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's so much money. Anyway, yeah, so maybe the blockchain, I could just show them the evidence, but they would still need 6 to 12 months to acknowledge it. Okay, so didn't mean to take it to that direction, but there's a security standard in the works. Oh, that's really cool. Thank you. And someone else is saying, yes, food afternoon, like the urban gardening from Pancakes Con. Yes. Oh my gosh. We should totally, anyway. Okay, Tanya's getting off track. She's back on track now. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides and I'm going to show the next one. And if you want to put any comments in the chat about this one or the next one, you're totally welcome. Okay, so next one. Okay, So, oh, wait. So we want to go to the next slide. So defense in depth. So what this means, so this is a concept that I am a huge fan of. And when I was a dev, I was like, no, but I have a safeguard. And they're like, well, if someone gets past that safeguard, I'm like, no, my code's always perfect. I really felt that. I like, so we're fine. And then I met a very nice ethical hacker who like got past one of my login screens, and I was like, what? Then he showed me how he did it. Then I was like, well, I must learn everything about this. And then before I know it, I was his apprentice, and the rest is history. But doing multiple layers of defense is a thing that I have to convince people into a lot. So the idea of, instead of having just one single defense, if the thing we're protecting is quite important, we will have multiple layers of defenses. So if someone breaks through one, there's another one, and maybe even another one that could stop them. It's in case one layer fails, we still have another one to protect our system. And so ideas for this could be, we give all of our devs secure coding training. We review their code to make sure that it's secure. Then we do security testing. And then on top of that, we have a shield in front of our application. So like a WAF, a web application firewall, and then maybe a RASP, a runtime application security protection system. You don't use a WAF and a RASP, you use one or the other. I think they'd probably mess with each other if you had both. But the point of the story is that one layer is not necessarily enough. So often I will talk to software developers and say, okay, so, we're doing input validation to make sure we're receiving input that is what we're expecting, and we're not accepting anything else. But then after that, we're going to take that input that we've validated so we know that it's good, and then we're going to put it in a stored procedure, and send it as a parameter to a stored procedure, rather than just making inline SQL statements in our code, like select star from table where table and then we just put the variable in, and then we concatenate that all together and send it off to the database. That is a perfect recipe for SQL injection, or no SQL injection. Like if you're using something like MongoDB, you just concatenate the stuff together and send it. But if you use a stored procedure or a parameterized query instead, you send that value as a parameter, the database takes that parameter and it will only ever treat it as data. It will never say, oh, this is part of my code, I should execute it. It takes all of its power away before it interprets it and runs it on the database server. So that's an additional layer of security. And we do these things because we want multiple layers of defense. Another thing you could add on top of that, so let's say you really are concerned about cross-site scripting. So you've done input validation, and then you used a parameterized query. But when the stuff comes out of the database and you're going to put it onto the screen, you could use output encoding. And that is a third layer of defense. In case someone stored some cross-site scripting and you didn't know, it would stop it in its tracks from executing. And so I realize some people are like, oh, that's a lot. And I'm like, yeah, it depends on how important your system is to you and how safe you need to keep it. And so, does anyone have examples of multiple layers of defense that they could use, like defense in depth ideas or concepts? And so I'm seeing T. Cambridge says, my mind spoke for my body, totally meant good afternoon. I love it. Alex says, my code's always perfect was the bumper sticker on my car. That's awesome. Tiana says, I'm still trying to break into the cybersecurity area. I obtained my bachelor's back in June 2019, but haven't stepped foot into that area yet, in my opinion. Well, Tiana, if you want, so at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share some free resources, and two probably apply to you. So one is the SheHacksPurple community, which is free for everyone. There's no upsell later. We just it's just free. And there, oh, wow, good job. There we basically we send, so you can sign up for drip content where it'll slowly teach you different topics. You can join conversations and talk to people. You can meet people. We have free online events where people give talks or we have discussions. I'm currently planning like some panel discussions, and then we have people that come on and teach. And the other thing that might interest you is Cyber Mentoring Monday. So every Monday I try to pair people with professional mentors, and I'll tell you more about that at the end. And I feel like, you could benefit if you want to use either of those. Oh, and Tiana says, just want to share how grateful I am to have a clear understanding of the various concepts in the field. Your calm tones will. Oh, I'm so glad that it's welcoming. Thank you. Yeah, most of my talks are actually just lessons. It's like, I learned this and I think it's cool and I want to tell you about it. That's how all of my stuff got started. And I didn't mean to start a training company. Basically, people were just like, could you come and train my devs? I'll give you money. And I was like, oh, money, that sounds really good. I don't have a job right now. Because I'd started a startup company and it didn't work out. And then I was like, what do I want to do next? Do I want to get a job? Do I want to start my own company? And people kept offering to pay me to train their devs. I was like, maybe that should be my job. And she's saying, Tyrone's awesome. Maybe I'm more accepting of it this specific time. Sometimes you actually need to hear a concept explained in a bunch of different ways, and then it clicks. I've been studying how to teach. And one of the biggest lessons is if you're going to teach someone an abstract concept, they need to hear it 3 times on average before it's cemented. So if there's a really specific thing, basically, if there's like a really abstract concept, especially if it's quite complex, you usually need to hear it 3 times. Oh, cool. Question. When did you decide to ditch full-time work and go solo? So I wanted to move on from Microsoft because I was finding the travel schedule really intense and it was like hard on me, like physically hard. And so my friend asked me if I wanted to start a startup company together, and we did, and it was such a disaster. You know how in DevOps they say fail fast? Well, we failed in 9 weeks. So we did a real DevOps like success there. But basically, sometimes you start a company with someone and you're both like, we want to go here. But then when you start going, you both like, you're going like this, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. So it didn't work out. And he continued on, and that's cool. Good job. But I was like, what do I want to do next? And so he's saying, I presume you can start as a side hustle. Yeah, you definitely can. I'm really bad for having several side hustles at the same time. Can you do a minimal viable product of your career? No, you literally can do a minimal viable product of your career. So that's actually what I did. So I started the SheHacksPurple online community. It actually used to cost $7 a month. And I remember the first time I announced it, someone joined that minute, like right there while I was on stage, they joined, and I was like, oh my God, I have a customer. And I had started doing just like tons of articles and stuff. Like I sent them so much stuff, and I did not understand. I was exhausting my community, and they're like, I'm stressed out. I can't keep up. Like, don't send me 5 or 6 articles a week. Could you send me like 1 or 2? And so basically I was just like, I just asked. So then before I knew it, I had like around $2,000 worth of reoccurring revenue, which, because right now, so I'm about to move, but right now where I live, I have like an apartment and my expenses are very, very low, and I could totally live off of $2,000 a month. So I designed my life, and like I downsized, I went from a house to an apartment, all these things on purpose so that I could like afford to start my own company. And yeah, so that was enough money to live off of. And then I asked my community members, I'm like, okay, so what do you want? Do you want 5 articles? Do you want 4, 3, 2, 1? And basically there was a toss up between 1 and 2 articles per month, because I was just like, I appreciate you so much. I want to do everything for you. And then I asked them, I'm like, do you want to talk to each other too and meet each other too? And they were like, yeah. So we moved to another platform, and we're on something called Mighty Networks right now. And it's amazing. If you can imagine like Facebook, but without ads, without tracking, and no one's allowed being mean. It's kind of like that. It's really pretty. And then I asked them after a while. So like then SheHacksPurple started making money, right? And $2,000 a month was like nothing. So I wrote my community members, I'm like, I want to make it free. so that's not, so like if someone lives in India, $7 a month is way more than if someone lives in the United States, or if they live in Canada, or if they live in, like, I don't know, Bangladesh, right? Like it's very different. And I realized I was mostly just having North American people in certain European countries. And I was like, I kind of want to invite everyone. Is that okay with all of you? And they voted like unanimously, like, yes, make it free. That's cool. And so then we opened it to everyone, and like we've grown, but you know, people refer other people, or you have to write a little blurb about why you want to join, and then someone reviews it and they're like, that person seems nice, come on in. And so far everyone's really nice still, so it's good, because I was worried if it was free, I'm like, what if mean people come? Then we have to moderate all the time and kick them out, and everyone's like, we'll help. So yeah, so you can totally do a minimal viable product, and it's okay if it changes over time. But I suggest like you poll your customers and ask them what they want rather than just deciding for them. I personally have found that to be really powerful, because sometimes I'm really surprised, because everyone's like, of course they're going to vote to make it free because they don't want to pay. I'm like, no, most of my members, they don't. $7, like if you make like 6 figures a year and you live in America, $7 is nothing, right? It was more like, if we open it, are the right people going to join? Are people going to join and like be nice and like actually talk to people and participate? Or, you know, is it going to be full of like people who want to cause trouble or who aren't nice? Oh, so someone, G. Voden, I'm not sure how to like pronounce your name, but he's saying he'd love to see a blog post about how to get started or any pitfalls. Yeah, actually, that's a really good idea. And Carpe Diem T3CH, the name of the platform is Mighty Networks. And so it's like around $100 a month, which again, like now my business is making money, I'm like, I got that, no problem. And then you pay per user, like just like a tiny bit. And the platform people are super nice. And the lady who runs it, Gina, she has like streams all the time. And like we had asked about like some security stuff, and then she had actually like changed those things for us. So I'm finding them really great. Yeah. Okay. So I guess no one has ideas for defense in depth. So I'm going to go to the next one and see. I'm really verbose. I'm that person who like talks and talks and talks. And so I do want to eventually go through all of these. Okay, so the next one's called least privilege. And basically it means only giving the amount of access and permission that you need, that's required, not what you want, to perform a specific function, and then nothing more. And so when I was a dev, I remember when they're like, we're going to take away your admin privileges. And I was like, I will die without my admin privileges. But it turned out actually I was just fine. And I didn't actually require them to do my job. I have had people take things away before, and I'm like, I cannot complete my duties without this. And when you explain why they give them back, it's better if they ask first, in my opinion, but I digress. And so I want to tell you a brief story that's not really my story. So there's this guy named Travis McPeak, and he's one of the people that leads one of the OWASP chapters. And like, I think he's awesome. And so I heard him on a podcast talk about this thing called Repo Kid. So he was working at Netflix at the time, and Netflix is on Amazon. So they use AWS, like Amazon Web Services, for their cloud. And I don't know if you've ever tried to give something permissions in AWS. It's complex. So I used to work at Microsoft, and I've worked at many Microsoft shops. And when you go into Azure, it's really easy to give permissions, like their access identity management. And like, I'm not trying to sell you it, like, please don't take that as like me telling you one's better than the other, but it's just like, it's so simple, and there's like 12 choices, and then you can make your own choice if you want to. And it's like pretty obvious to me. But when you go into AWS, there's up to 1,000 different permissions. And so what would happen is that their developers would be like adding this and adding this and adding that and adding that. And then eventually it's like, oh, good, my thing finally works. Awesome. And then they would put it out. But meanwhile, there'd be like 24 permissions on this little tiny microservice that only does one thing. And it's like, why does it need 24 permissions? And so it turned out they weren't using tons of them. And so they made this little, so like the Netflix AppSec team's really cool. It's led by this lady named Asta, and she's awesome. She's like, well, let's just make an app to try to like solve this. And so they wrote a thing and they called it Repo Man. And Repo Man would go and repossess, like take away a bunch of permissions it thought you weren't using. And then what happened is it broke a lot of crap. And then the software developers were like, I don't really appreciate you breaking my stuff. And the security team's like, yeah, it's not good. And so what they did was they took away Repo Man and they rethought it out. They're like, there has to be a way for us to go to apply least privilege. Because the reason why we do this is because if someone manages to take over that little microservice, if it just has one permission versus 24, it means it can only do one thing instead of 24 things. Right. And so I have seen people take over an account or like get permissions of whatever thing. And if there's lots of permissions, what happens is they can do tons of awful stuff. And so when you've applied least privilege, that means they're in this little box and they can't do very much. And that is awesome for us to do to an attacker, as long as the person or the people who are depending on the system can get all the things they need done with it. So that is the trick. That's the balancing act. And so what they did is they came up with something and they named it Repo Kid to make it less aggressive. And what it would do is it would watch. So a new service is released and they watch that microservice and they're like, what is that dude doing? And it's like, oh, it called this permission. That means it needs it. Oh, it called that permission. It means it needs that. But it's never called the other 22 permissions. And it's been like 2 months now. So then it would like temporarily remove the permissions, and then it would continue to monitor to see if it still worked. If it still worked, then it would permanently remove those permissions. And they did that slowly. And then over the course of like less than a year, they removed something like 92%, I forget the exact number, of permissions across their entire AWS instance. That's amazing. That's the most amazing implementation of least privilege with automation that I've ever heard of. And so it's so cool that now like a bunch of companies like Salvo Cloud and Hermetic, and there's like a whole bunch of them, mostly out of Israel, that are basically like creating even better iterations of that, where it will just magically like least privilege all of your stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And so that is the idea of least privilege. So like the thing still needs to work. You can't break the availability of the thing you're trying to protect, right? That's very bad. Security should not be the threat to availability. But if you can do it in a way where it's still available, it can still do everything it needs to, but that's it. It can't do anything else. That is least privilege. And so this means no more. I don't know how many of you have ever had like a C-level executive come up to you and they're like, so I'm going to need you to turn off that web filtering and give me, admin rights and this and that. Cause like, I find those things inconvenient and like, I need to be able to do whatever I want. And then I'm always like, oh no, that's never happening. But here's why. I've just had lots of C-level executives like corner me and I'm like, so just, the answer is going to be no, but I'm going to tell you why. And we'll come up with some compromises and stuff. I'm like, never giving you admin back. No, that's not happening. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the chat and see if anyone has like ideas of least privilege that they want to share. So not just necessarily about AWS or about cloud, but like other ideas of least privilege. So I'm going to just look in the chat. So defense in depth, multi-factor authentication, different firewalls, etc. Yes. Someone else says, yes, AWS is very user-friendly. And someone else says, managing permissions in AWS is my food afternoon. I love it. But least privilege can apply to all sorts of things, right? Like for instance, so like I have mini humans, also known as children, and when they end up getting a key, they're going to get a key just to the house, right? And then eventually they might get a key to the garage, or eventually in like 10 years from now, they'll get a key to the car. And so like, do they need a key to the car now? No. Should they have a key to the car when they're like really little still? No, because they don't need that privilege. But when they're a teenager, we are going to argue about how they want those privileges, right? And so does anyone else have other examples they'd like to share about least privilege? You guys are so funny in the chat. The only thing, oh, valet key. I never get to go to a place fancy enough that there's a valet. And also I drive a 2007 Honda Fit. It doesn't really need a valet. It's not a fancy car. Yeah. Okay, so there's something from Tiana. So in life, start small and build on what you allow others to access and know about, because everyone does not need or deserve to have that much access to you. Okay, so that's a brilliant way to just live your life. Yeah, I really like that. Oh, and we have a new person in the chat, least privilege. At work, I only get the permissions to do my job as a quality associate at the fulfillment center. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Like you don't have a key to the server room because you don't work in operations. So you don't need to go in that room. So why would your key fob let you in there? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And someone else is saying, so for Airbnb as an example, there might be certain rooms that are locked versus shared. Yeah, I have a friend who rents out a cottage and she has one room that is locked and the cottage is for like 10 people. It's like, it's so huge. It's really nice. And what's in that room is like extra soap, extra like laundry stuff, cleaning supplies. It's like really boring. It's not like super secret stuff, but she's like, I don't want everyone to see all of our crap. I want the house to look perfect for when they rent it, you know, for their summer vacation. So someone else, yeah, role-based authentication. Yes. William saying, I can process a deposit at the bank, but I can't process a withdrawal, a transfer, a credit check, etc. Yeah, William, that's actually a really good example. So I'm the CEO of my tiny 5-person company, and I can give one of them a deposit form and they can deposit cash into our account, but none of them can take cash out. They don't have signing authority because there's only 5 of us, right? And it's not such a huge bottleneck to have me do that. Giving access based on role and need to know. Oh yes, Tania, need to know is really important. Okay, so privileges should be implemented at the core level of building your applications and servers and deciding how they work and which and what access to provide. Yes. Marcellus 995. Yes, that's so good. Okay, all of you are awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to show you another slide. So from current slide. And now we're going to go on to supply chain security. So this is really hot right now because of the 2020 SolarWinds incident. Let's call it that, the incident. So what this means is all the components, the libraries, the frameworks, and any code you didn't write, anything you didn't build that you must put into your app make up your supply chain. So like, let's say I'm going to make some cookies or butter tarts. So I live in Canada, and the other day I tried to make butter tarts and I am trying to have less sugar. So instead of putting in sugar, I put Splenda, and Splenda exploded. So I mixed it with the corn syrup and the other ingredients, and I put it in the oven, and I'd never done Splenda before. I'd done sugar. And the Splenda, not to talk trash about Splenda, Splenda's great, but some sort of reaction happened and it bubbled up, and it bubbled over the little cups, over the thing, all into the bottom of the oven. Oh, it went everywhere. It was very bad. And that happened to me this week. And so my supply chain, so I changed a thing in my supply chain, and I chose that change. Like I used, what would you say, a substitution, right? I substituted something else, and then like all crap broke loose. I had to actually like clean my oven, and I ended up having to throw out the tray because the Splenda and the corn syrup like burned onto the tray so badly. I was like trying to get it off with a knife, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And so that was my error of doing a substitution in my supply chain. But imagine if like one of those things that I got was poison or toxic or had gone bad. Like what if I went to put my eggs in, but I had left them in the fridge way too long and they weren't even good anymore. And so that is your supply chain, all the things that you use to build your product or your thing. And so specifically for custom apps, each dependency should not have known vulnerabilities in it. So I say it needs to be secure. Like I would prefer that you actually check it yourself, but not doing that, like using a third-party tool to tell you, it's not on any bad lists, we're unaware of it having any problems, that's way better than nothing. And a lot of people do nothing. And so just verifying that it's not known to be bad already is good. And then I wrote tools and tips for this. So for custom applications, I use a software composition analysis tool, sometimes called SCA, or I have this one colleague that calls it ska. And then I think of like ska music, like punk music with like horns and stuff. So I immediately imagine like ska music every time he says that, which is funny. But basically, it is a tool that will look through all your dependencies, your libraries, anything that's code you didn't write, and it'll check it to see if it's on any bad lists. Other things you could do is you can look at your list of dependencies and go look them up and look up to see if it has more than one person maintaining it. Has it been updated in the past year? Is it open source or is there like a company behind it? Doing things like that can help you know like what shape it's in. So let's say there's a library and it's like supported by one person, you don't know them, it's an open source project, it's not under the umbrella of like a bigger open source organization, it hasn't been updated in 3 years, don't put that in your application. That's probably not secure. Instead, you could do something better. You like find something else that is more secure, right? Like there's a lot of different options when we want to look at this sort of thing. And so I'm wondering if any of you have comments about supply chain security and how we could do better ensuring that the things we use to build our app are safe. Okay, so Bob has a bunch of comments. Log4j is the most recent example of supply chain security related to software libraries. Oh, Bob, I have lived and breathed Log4j ever since that moment. I literally had a meeting yesterday with a bunch of executives about it. It brings the need for software born to the forefront. Yes, Bob. Yes. I'm glad people are finally paying some attention to this because like I've been like, it's important, yelling into the void for years now. And it's sad that bad things have happened as a result, but I am glad that it has really changed people's minds and people are paying more attention. And then William says, Foxconn Supermicro firmware with benefits. With benefits. Some woman that I follow on the internet, she said, y'all need to stop being so negative. Stop saying, it's got remote code execution. Instead say, this API has bonus functionality. So Bob is saying, a software bill of materials, sometimes called an SBOM. Yeah, that could really help. Nathaniel says, dependencies built upon dependencies built upon dependency. Yeah, Nathaniel, sometimes software developers will call it dependency hell, where you're trying to manage a dependency chain that just goes down and down and down, and you're like 5 layers deep. And, this one dependency now has 60 total. And you're just like, oh my gosh, do I want to use this? Does this seem like a good idea? Can I check the other ones? Am I okay? Hamza says, I hope I've said your name right, Hamza. So risk versus supply chain over the last few years have certainly become a museum of horrors. Yeah, it's true. Like really big companies depending upon that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm trying to hire another person to do sort of like what I do now. And I was saying, I'm hoping we could do a bunch of things together where we contribute to some of these open source problems. And I feel like, we're not all just going to volunteer to work for free all the time on every single, like we can't do all of them, but I'm like, what if we just did one and life would be better for like one thing, and start there. So Carpe Diem says, I wrote 2 poems about it at some levity. Ahoy, a good tale, mate, could help abate some woe from this time when vulnerabilities were prime, as we spray mitigations for Log4j. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. It's so good. I was going to write another blog post about my meeting yesterday because like some of us were talking about like the long-term costs, and one company told me that they did 100 weeks worth of work in that 8 days. They calculated just how many people from how many teams spent how much overtime, and it was 100 weeks of work. That's 2 employees working for an entire year. It was neat to learn the history lesson of logging. Yeah, that was cool. William says, someone didn't like it yesterday when I asked them to perform a scan of the file system because I was trying to ascertain whether their custom OS had PolyKit, which is this week's dumpster fire. Yeah, I know. It's painful. One of the awesome things about AppSec is that you're never bored. There's always cool stuff to do and to learn. And I feel that's great. However, I do see that, yeah, it can be frustrating. And I think that our industry needs to, we have to work to fix this problem, right? Like a lot of us are putting all of these components into our apps all the time, and the security person's never looked at them. And we put it in and then we push it to prod and we have no idea what we're adding. So yeah, this is a thing I talk about a lot. And sometimes I even talk about, what if we used fewer dependencies? And then people are like, Tanya's like nuts. Okay, next slide. Security by obscurity. So this basically means open source versus closed source, or broadcasting versus hiding. And so I don't feel that you should ever use this as your only layer of defense. But if you are doing multiple layers of defense, this could be one of them, right? Like it's not enough on its own. It's definitely not. But it can help to protect your intellectual property. So I wrote a book. I used to be a professional musician, so I have like all these albums out. And then I also have like these online courses, and people pirate all the time. But having it be closed source rather than open source, having it be, so for instance, like if you get a copy of my ebook, my publisher has done all these things to try to protect it from being copied. It has been copied many times, and I always report it, and I'm like, could you please take the PDFs of this down? Thank you. But it does help protect IP, because if, for instance, let's say that, Alice and Bob Learn was just a PDF that you would get, people would email it to everyone, right? So there's less intellectual property theft because they've done this precaution. It's not that there's none, it makes it less intense. And so when we talk about closed source versus open source, like Log4j is a really good example of how, open source does not necessarily make it more secure. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, like it's got everyone's eyes on it and everyone can see it, so it's more secure than proprietary software. And I'm like, proprietary software has a security team. It's backed by a company. There's money there. So I think that all of them are different. Okay, so William says applications had Log4j, and when faced with the vulnerability, they admitted that they didn't use that functionality. Yeah, so that's the easiest one. You just take it out, right? I was giving a lot of advice about that. Like, are you calling it? No, just there's a cool feature in .NET in I'm seeing I have a message in, okay. There's a cool feature in .NET that I discovered when I was a dev, is that I could go through and say, are any of my dependencies not used? And it would be like these ones. I'm like, just take them out. And so whenever I would compile someone else's code, I would just take them out. And the reason why I was doing that is because, one, I'm like a neat freak. Oh yes, please hit the like button. Yes, and subscribe. Yes. But on top of that, I removed them because I wanted them to be faster. I just want my apps to run faster. And I'm like, well, if we have 12 dependencies and we're only using 4, ditch those 8 and I'm going to compile faster. I'm going to run faster. Sounds awesome. But I didn't even realize I was reducing my attack surface. I was reducing risk. I was doing all of these positive security things, but I was just like, I need it to be neat and pretty. Okay. Does anyone have other examples of security by obscurity? I'm going to give you another example and then we can move on. But so if you have a router, you can broadcast your SSID. So I live in an apartment, and don't tell, but I share internet with the other 2 apartments. And so we blast our SSID. And so in our house, you can join our Wi-Fi. It's like a house that's 3 apartments. And like, so we can all join it. And like, you know, if a guest comes, we like let them on there because I guess we're not that risk adverse at home. But let's say you have a pacemaker or some other medical device inside your body. Do you want to blast that SSID? Because I don't think I want people, like, I don't have a pacemaker, but I've talked to people that have one. It's like, I feel like I can make this huge, broad assumption that most of them do not want anyone connecting to their heart, to their pacemaker, unless it's like a doctor or someone that's taking care of them. They don't want randos trying to connect for obvious reasons, right? And so what you could do is make your SSID, like the name of your Wi-Fi, invisible and not broadcast it. And so you can only connect to it if you know it in advance. And is that perfect? Does that 100% protect them? No, but it greatly reduces the visibility and risk for anyone to even know that there is something there to be attacked. So William says, example, hidden features on web pages. So like a prepaid Visa hiding the visible button, but F12 shows the link to add the zip code for online shopping. The hidden SSID is a great example of security by obscurity because the broadcasts are disabled, but during a normal communication, Wireshark will still show the transmissions. Yeah, it's totally not foolproof, but it greatly reduces the risk. Good example, William. So Carpe Diem says, think through your risk profile and your risk tolerance, and then based upon that, decide what sort of OPSEC you'll do. Yep. I literally was having a conversation earlier about how I explain risk to customers, but with my friend who does not work in tech. No, but most devices do not have sufficient security. Yes, I agree. And there are some groups that are working to help the medical industry make those more secure. So there's like an IEEE group dedicated to that. And then there's also like a volunteer nonprofit called I Am the Cavalry, and they are trying to work towards that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Okay. We have 2 left now. So from current slide. So attack surface reduction. So this means just removing any parts of your code that aren't being used. Like it means removing things that you don't need. So like so when I was a dev at first, sometimes I would comment things out and then later delete them. But I don't know if you've ever opened old code and like 3/4 of it is commented out, or it's like the button to go to that page is invisible, but the page is still up. I'm like, no. Every part of your app or every part of your network or every part of whatever system is a part of your attack surface. And if part of it's being unused, just like remove it. If you know for sure it's not going to be used later, remove it. If it might be used later, you could take that code, take it out, but like save it in your code repository so you still have it. So the less attack surface you have, the less malicious actors have to work with. And the most important part here is like any unused portions of your app are usually like for security. That's the technical term. But basically, like if so let's say you've grayed out or like removed the button so no one can see, but the page is still live. No one's doing security testing on that page. You probably haven't updated the things on that page in a while or taken a look at it or thought of it. A lot of things I see here is APIs where they release version 2 and they never decommission version 1. And so you can still call it and still do evil stuff with it. And a lot of APIs are being attacked right now by that. And so whatever we can do to reduce our attack surface, it just makes it significantly more difficult for attackers. And we're often usually removing a much bigger percentage of risk than the rest of the app because it hasn't had attention in so long. And so I'm wondering if anyone has ideas about how to reduce attack surface. So William's saying breaking links to pages, but the page still remains. So like hiding the link to an admin portal, for instance. But if you know the name, you could still enter it in the address. Like how many schools protect stuff this way? Well, William, like you can use security tools to do directory busting and like crawling and stuff. And then they can often find those pages and people that are really good pen testers, they can just guess because it's been so long and they've done it forever. And they're like, oh, it's probably named this. And then they're right a lot, like a scary number of time. William's also saying TLS 1.0 fallback. Yep, being backwards compatible for broken protocols, that is a problem too. Hamza says, a big one is reviewing features that have fallen out of use and then nipping them in the bud. Yes, so much yes. Okay, and William adds more. So some folks might have abused the ability to fall back from CHAP to PAP in the clear. So a lot of malicious actors use backwards compatibility so that you get to a broken protocol and then they can get somewhere with your system. It's a problem. Most of the cloud providers just won't allow any SSL on their systems. They're just like, no, that's ridiculous. If you want to do that, you do it on-prem. We don't want to touch that garbage. But I have definitely many times seen all of these old things enabled. And I'm like, listen, if someone's like in the middle of nowhere and they're trying to connect with Windows XP and they have like Internet Explorer version 8, I can do without that customer's money. I'm going to be fine because chances are they're actually a malicious actor. Like there's a very good chance, especially because they're not going to be taking an AppSec class if they run Windows XP. They're like, I'm sorry. Okay, we have one more, and it's a very important one, and it's usable security. So if the security feature causes user problems, they will find a way around it. It also makes people frustrated to use your product, which means them less likely to buy it, less likely to renew, less likely to recommend it. And so if we can find a compromise and find more creative solutions to secure our systems, it can actually lead to customer delight and better compliance. And so sometimes we have to brainstorm and we have to go back to the drawing board. So I want to give you an example because that's how I am. So a bad example. So I read about this in a study. So I took a course, I think at Michigan State University, about usable security. And so one of their examples, which was really beautiful, was so they have these doctor systems in hospitals, and hospitals are brutally bad for security. So bad. It's really hard to update things. And there's like just patient information everywhere. And it's kind of a nightmare when it comes to privacy. And so they're like, we have these systems, like a computer system in every single place. And, you know, when they're in the emergency room, they like come in, they use the thing, and then they leave, and they would leave it open a lot with all the personal data. So what they did is they set up like a proximity scanner on the little computer system. And so you had to be close to it. And the moment you walked away, after 30 seconds, it would lock the system. You'd have to log in. And the idea is when the doctor's done, he or she like leaves the room and it will automatically lock itself. So it sounds really good. Like when you come into my apartment, I have lights that automatically turn on because I found it really dark. And so they automatically turn on. It's awesome. And then they automatically turn off after 5 minutes, which is cool. But if I keep moving, it stays on. So like, let's say I'm, I don't know, taking off my jacket and I'm putting it on. And for whatever reason, I am in that little part of my apartment for a really long time. It'll just stay on because I'm moving. Unless I stop, completely still for 5 whole minutes, the light's going to stay on. Then I go upstairs, I can't forget it on and waste energy. It's like the little foyer when we all go into the apartment. Cool, save energy. But this one, the doctor would go and sit down and talk to the patient, the thing would lock. And I'd get up and they'd unlock it. And then they'd be examining the patient, it would lock itself. I go back and they log in again. So they had to log in over and over. And the doctors were like, I can't do my job. Like, if a patient's sitting there bleeding out, I can't effing log in. And so a smart nurse was like, hey, guess what? And they had like a little empty, you know, those empty, really crappy styrofoam cups that you'll get like the world's worst coffee in at like a free meetup or something. And you're just like, oh, so they took that cup, put it upside down on top of the motion sensor, and then it just stayed open all the time. And so a week later, they come back and every single one of them is unlocked and has a little cup on it. And now it's worse because it's unlocked 100% of the time. Yeah. And users are really smart. I remember I was at the hospital to go pick someone up and I'm like asking questions. And the nurse was like, oh yeah, I'll look that up for you. And she's like, oh, I can't get to this web page. Oh, the web filtering's blocking it. And the other nurse is like, oh, you just go to this other website and then you go through it and then you can get to any website you want. And she brought her to like a proxy, super shady website that then would change their IP and bring them somewhere else. And I was like, what? I'm like, you're breaking a security policy. And they're like, yeah, but I need to like look this up for customers or for patients a lot. And I think it was something to do with parking and like the parking rules, because people would get tickets all the time and then they would get angry at the nurses and the front hall people, like the people that work in the hospital. And they're like, it's not my fault. Like, here's the rules, blah, blah. And she's like, but when we go to look it up, it's blocked by the web filtering. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous, right? They can't do their job. So least privilege broken, right? And so making security that's not usable is awful. So I'm going to give you a good example of Useable Security. So I'm from Canada, and so I try to support other Canadian companies. And so that was the original reason I chose 1Password. But now I'm like, it is by far the best password manager, in my opinion. I love it so much. Sometimes for clients, I have to use other ones, and it just reinforces how much I love 1Password. And so what it will do is when you go to log in somewhere, so like you put your master password in, the one password you need to know, and then it's unlocked. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to log into the site. And it goes and it does it for you. And then if you have set up your MFA challenge within 1Password, it will copy it. So you just press paste in the next screen, or it'll even paste it for you sometimes, the security code. And then you just press enter. And then whatever was previously on your clipboard, it copies it back onto your clipboard for you so you didn't lose whatever you had copied. So I don't know about you, but like I'll go to pay a bill and I'll be like, oh, I owe like $86.42. And I many times have like messed up the numbers when I go to pay a bill. And then they're like, you owe us $11 and you have late fees. And I'm like, oh man, I just like reversed the 6 and the 5. So I always copy and paste now so I don't mess that up. And so I'll be logging into my bank and it's like, oh, cool. But it copied it back onto the clipboard. So I don't have to go back to my email, find the bill again. It just has it there. And that's usable security. That makes me doing my 1Password challenge unpainful, right? And so then I'm more likely to use those and not go around those security features. Does anyone have, so I'm going to read some of the things in the chat, but I'm wondering if anyone has examples of good usable security. And so G-Voden says, the best I've seen yet, the business wants you to turn the security thing off. You're blocking the business. Yeah, that's too vague. That's too vague, but I've seen that. Yeah. So Michael says, if security is too onerous, like a 24-digit password with upper and lower and case plus special characters and numbers, or having to change it every week, they will not use the app. Yeah, for sure. Someone's saying that sounds like Apple's keychain. Yeah, it's similar to Apple's keychain, except for a password manager encrypts it and requires an extra password to get in. And what that means is that if you leave your computer unlocked, your password manager will still be locked. Thoughts on passwordless technology to ease user convenience. So I dream of the day, Soladine, I hope I said your name right. I dream of the day of where we do passwordless. It's going to be awesome. So my phone unlocks with my face, and if I'm not wearing a mask, that works. I have done lots of things where, you use your fingerprint. I'm not willing to give my fingerprint to other people, but on my own personal device, kept on there. I'm cool with that. The passwordless stuff is brilliant. I wish that we had started with that. But we have to build consumer confidence because the security industry has screwed up so many times, so many times, that it really needs to be perfect, or, even as we create better versions later, we won't have consumer confidence to get them to use it. So I'm very excited about passwordless coming out. I cannot wait. Life will be grand, but we really have to get it right. I'm quite concerned about that. So William says, firms started removing software after 30 days of non-use, so people put the software in the startup group. Yes. I have a friend that's a PhD biochemist, and she tests all of those, like how you'll get supplements at grocery stores or whatever, like to help you with your health. So she tests all of them to make sure they're all safe to consume. And she requires 6 separate passwords to log in, and they make her change all of them every 90 days. They cannot be the same, none of them. And they all change every 90 days, but different days. So like one week it's password 3 that changes, and the other week it's password 6. And so every single person in her office has 6 Post-it notes with the passwords written on all of them. And she's like, oh yeah, it's on the weekends, we're doing an experiment. So I was like, oh yeah, I could totally do that because I have every single person's passwords just written out for me. And she's like, literally before we were doing that, we were on the phone to help desk every single day for multiple hours. My whole team, I was just like, I can't get my job done. And I told her about passwordless, and she was just like, why can't I have that? Tiana says, having a car fob is a good one for me, especially if it's lost in my purse. As long as it's in range, I can still access my vehicle. Yes, I totally lose stuff in my purse. But it sucks if anyone else gets the fob, however. If you can make the fob so you can deactivate it easily, like a user would be able to deactivate it easily, then I feel that would be okay. And it also, does the fob open the door, or does it start the car? Right? So I have friends that have a Tesla, and it starts the car. And I'm like, yeah, I want more. LV says, when consumers are comfortable with the use of our data, then maybe we'll be more comfortable with technology like facial recognition. Yeah, especially when it's not used against us. G. Voden says, using a certificate as MFA second factor, which gets supplied by the application on your behalf, could reduce security fatigue. Yes. I used to work at an IT company, and every single person did IT. So usually I do IT at a company that does other things. And this was not Microsoft. This was another place. And whenever I would walk into the building, there was a cert that would automatically wirelessly connect me to the internet and authenticate me. I still had to sign into the network, but it would authenticate my device immediately. And so we had MFA like that, and it was really cool. Hamza says, key fobs are far from secure. There are some scary videos out there. Yeah, I know. Rodesha says, I think I think she's saying falls down to user education and understanding the importance of security policy. Most employees are just trying to do their jobs effectively. Yes. I would say 99.999% of employees just want to get their job done and don't want to be hassled. Oh yeah. So Soladine says, what about if one can deactivate the key fob on your device the moment you find out it's stolen? Yeah, that would be better. G. Voden says, right, for Wi-Fi and even wired networks, having a certificate that authenticates you. whatever we can do to take the onus and effort off of the final user, but still protect them, I think is good. Marcella says token technology such as RSA, which provides hard physical tokens as well as software tokens. Yeah, I think those are cool. I think those are very cool. I look forward to the day where security is a lot better. Like some of the things are getting better, like some of the user behavior. So for instance, Tanya's logged in from Paris, but it's weird because 1 hour ago she was logged in from British Columbia in Canada. How did she get to Paris in 1 hour? Maybe there's a problem here, right? So there's really obvious ones like that, but now it's getting, they're getting smarter and smarter so they can be more advanced. But I've also been in situations where, so I was driving my car, I was on like a little mini road trip, and I wanted to go to this cool meetup that was on a Discord channel. So then I went to log into Discord and it said, we don't recognize where you're connecting from. So we've sent you a thing, but they sent it to my home computer. And like, I couldn't get the email on my phone for some reason. Like I just didn't, like I never received their thing to approve the whatever. And it was like, you need to review this later. And it blocked me. So I couldn't attend the meetup and I was supposed to be there. And I was like, oh, this really sucks. And I didn't know what to do because it's like, well, I'm like a 2-hour drive from home. I don't have an option. I can't make it in time. And also like then my trip is messed up. And so I emailed them and I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm not allowed to connect. Sorry. And I've had Discord do that to me twice. And I'm like, you're protecting me / like making it so I literally can't participate and use your product. Like, guys. So there's another comment from G. Voden. Social logins can be another example of usable security. Yeah, social logins and like single sign-on, like being able to use like Google to sign on to multiple things. I always make my own username and password because I really don't like Google and I really don't like Facebook. And I'll use the Twitter login, but most of the rest of the platforms, I'm like, no, I hate you guys. There's no way I'm going to use it. But I am not your average candidate when it comes to securing your systems and usability. So I have just a few slides left, so I'm just going to finish up, and then we can go on to Tyrone's next step in this process. So we did usable security, and basically you now have a head start in securing all the things, because these 8 concepts can apply to anything in your life, and especially everything at work. And hopefully, like, you're going to run into these things from now on. You're going to be like, least privilege, assume breach. And you're just like, oh, I know. That's my plan, is that you know all the things. And so let's secure all the things together. And so these are the things we covered. And now I'm going to give you some free resources. So first of all, I have a podcast. So we just started season 2. And we're not going to be every week like we used to be because I found that really exhausting. And running like live events plus the podcast plus writing, I was just like, it's too much. So now I pre-record the podcast episodes with a guest, and basically I interview them about a specific thing and have them teach us a little lesson. And the first one was last week, and it was with Adam Shostak, and he talked about threat modeling and how we can do it fast, cheap, and good, which I thought was really awesome. And he's like, it doesn't need to be perfect. And a lot of people, when they talk with me about threat modeling, they're all worried about making it perfect, and then they don't get it done. And so he had all these really cool ideas. Anyway, I like Adam, and it was a great conversation. And so podcast on any podcast platform, or go to our YouTube. Awesome books. So I think my book is the most awesome of the books. But really, if you're interested in DevOps, I love DevOps. The first 4 books are all about why DevOps is awesome. I love these 4 books. I have 2 copies of all of them, like a physical copy and an audiobook copy. And Allison Bobler in Application Security is the book I wrote. And if you're interested in learning more, it could be a good way to get there. Every Monday, I run a totally informal mentor matching program called Cyber Mentoring Monday. And you use this hashtag and you ask for a mentor, or you do the opposite and you offer to mentor people and help them. This could mean having a virtual coffee. It could mean someone recommending you a bunch of books that really worked for them. And sometimes it turns into super long-term relationships that are really, really beneficial for both parties. And so I invite you to check out this hashtag and consider responding to someone and maybe finding a mentor. Another resource is the SheHacksPurple community, which is free. There's no upsells. It's just all free. And we have one course in there, but we're thinking of putting some more courses in there. And basically, you can meet like-minded people, hang out. Sometimes we meet up online. Sometimes we have lessons. Sometimes we have panels or people give talks. So February 10th, we have this nice lady named Ashley, and she's going to talk about how she got into InfoSec without any technical skills, and like how she got there and how she found her place and how you can do it too, which is pretty awesome. And the last resource is me. I am a nerd on the internet. And so I have Twitter. I have 2 blogs now. So I have the professional blog where I'm being an adult, and that's on WeHackPurple.com. And then I have the Tanya is just ranting about things blog, and that's at SheHacksPurple.ca. And then I have my YouTube. So my YouTube's pretty silly. Like I have some parodies of like me singing songs and like changing the words. So it's about Log4j and stuff. So be prepared for like some silliness. If you go to SheHacksPurple, if you're like, I want to be very professional, then you should go to WeHackPurple. Just telling you the truth. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending this meetup. I want to thank Tyrone for having me. And I want to see if there's any questions. Oh, and so Soladine says, Cyber Mentoring Monday is on which platform? Oh, sorry, it's Twitter. It's only on Twitter. Every single Monday on Twitter. And it started as Mentoring Monday, and then it went to Cyber Mentoring Monday because it got so popular. All these other groups were using it, and then no one could tell which ones were the cyber ones. And so, yeah, thank you. Hi, Tyrone.
Hey.
How's it going?
How are you? How you doing? Great job as usual.
Thank you.
So happy to have you, as well as everyone that joined us today. We're going to do something a little different.
Okay.
Today now. So now we're going to break into the little interview portion, the one-on-one. It's just to give, the audience an opportunity to know you, right? I'm sure they've seen the tweets and are aware of the community, and we talk tech a lot, but I want to show that, we're all real people as well. So
we are.
Yeah. I enjoyed being on the show, on your show. That was really, really fun.
Yeah.
And we're here. So my first question is, tell us about Tanya. Who is Tanya?
Tanya's like a pretty darn happy person who is very silly and ridiculous, who's obsessed with gardening. And I just bought a farm this week.
A farm, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
It has 3 acres, and I get to move in like just over a month, and I'm so excited.
Nice. What made you want to get a farm?
So maybe about 10 years ago, I had like this big incident at work where basically one of my staff had a break with reality. Like she has mental illness, and she attacked me and like went super crazy. And like we had to get security to like wrestle her and bring her out. And then after I started getting really anxious. And so I went to see like a psychologist because I was like feeling like really anxious like all the time. And like, that's a pretty normal reaction if like someone jumps you in a secure building. And also like none of my male colleagues came to help. They all hid. Like this person, like, I don't know if you've ever seen someone like lose their mind, but it was like really frightening because she wasn't with us. She wasn't the person we knew. And so then I went to see a psychologist, and like and I was like, I'm feeling really anxious and stuff. And they're like, okay, so, read these books, do these things. And so a lot of the main advice, like besides seeing a psychologist, is that you should get sunshine, that you should exercise, and that you should, it sounds weird, but touch earth, like touch ground. And I remember thinking that was the weirdest one. And I'm like, okay, so how could I do this the most efficiently? Because I want to get better like now. And so I was like, I'm going to garden. And I lived like right downtown, and my property was like this postage stamp. It was like my lawn, I think was like 12 feet by like 10 feet. It's really small, Tyrone. And I was like, I'm going to learn about gardening and get better. And so I was like, okay, so like I had no idea what I was doing. I had like a black thumb. I'd never really grown anything before. And so I planted some tomatoes. And I went to Home Depot and like, tell me the things. And they're like, you buy some earth and you like throw seeds in it and then occasionally put water on it. And like, then you wait. I'm like, I can so do this. And then I loved it. I loved it so much that it kind of shocked me. And so whenever I feel stressed, I just go garden and it immediately is gone. It's like this magic potion. Yeah. And so I started doing more and more. And then just before, like when the pandemic started, I met a special someone who's also into that. And then we started gardening together and then growing more food and more food. And so my property right now, my little tiny city lot. So like I moved from that smaller place to a bigger place. I have 17 raised beds and 3 homemade greenhouses.
Nice.
Like every single inch has a thing growing on it. And then in the apartment, we usually have things growing too. And like, it's so fun. The people in the other apartments are like, oh, you're doing it again. I'm like, do you want some beets? Because I have some. Do you want some squash? And they're like, stop giving us vegetables all the time. And so this summer, we made like a farm stand and put it at the end of the lawn. And so this is going to sound silly, but like my neighbors were like, you keep giving us this for free, but we'd actually like to support you because you've been giving us this stuff for a few years now. Can you make a farm stand so we could pay you? And I was like, oh, no one's going to buy anything, right? We made $550 by just and we just put like a little box at the end of and I like started having no idea, Tyrone. I had no idea what I was doing. And like no one in my family is into it. I have one cousin who's into it, but like everyone else is just like, oh, Tanya and her weird obsession. So then my sweetheart and I was like, let's buy like some land. And so we finally just found a place, and I'm just like, I'm so ecstatic of like, and we keep talking about like, oh my gosh, if we take this tree down, then we could do this thing, and then we could like put compost here, and then maybe we could get chickens. And like, it's funny that this thing that I never even realized. So if I ever have like a bad day, I just go out into the garden, or if it's cold out or raining, I go into the greenhouse and I'll just like prune tomatoes for an hour or two. And it's like, I go into this Zen state and I come back, I'm totally calm and I'm totally happy and the stress is gone. And I didn't know there was a thing that could do that. Cause like I used to play punk rock music and was in bands. And so like drumming and singing or playing guitar and singing, like really was my thing before gardening. That would like, oh, my stress. But I live in an apartment, and I don't know if you've ever like moved drums. So like you're moving into a place and they see you bring in drums. They're all like, no. So I sold my drums before I moved into this apartment because I knew that would not fly. But now where we're moving, we have 3 acres. So I could totally be super loud again.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. I can totally, and congrats on the farm. I can totally relate to the growing of plants because during COVID, I bought an arrow garden and it got really addictive. And pruning those, what grew really fast? The peppers, the jalapeno peppers, just grew really, really fast. You may have even seen me. What else did I grow? A lettuce. So I bought some romaine lettuce, chopped it, grew it in a cup, and then over time moved it to a plant. So I think Latasha was her name, is what I named her. Also, grounding is a real thing, I heard, to be one with earth. So to go out, take your shoes off. So you are one with earth. And it's to a point to where people actually have grounding rods that go from the ground to the bed. So they can feel the magnetic energy from the earth while they're laying in bed. And I heard it helps your immune system. It helps everything. So it's a real thing. It is a real thing.
You can get a grounding mat that goes next to your keyboard. And so that your wrists or arms can touch that all day. Okay. I don't have one, but my friend has one and she swears by it. And I'm like, oh, I just go in the garden.
Okay.
So
Next question. Tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and if you have anything that you're doing upcoming. Any plans?
Where do I even start? So I think I started my first official legal company when I was 19, and it was me playing music in bars and organizing other bands. And then I'd earn like this tiny amount of money, and I was like, yes. And then I bought my first property, and I rented out rooms. And so I learned about property management a lot and about roommates and how much damage renters can cause. I'm really good at fixing things. I've like retarred my own roof. I have like replaced toilets and like I've done hardwood. Yeah. So I learned about hard work.
Right.
And so then when it came to like starting a technology business, I was kind of nervous. So like I was at Microsoft and I was like, at first it was really fun, but then the travel was just more and more intense. And at one point I was away like 5 months and I was just like, no one even remembers who I am anymore. I was dating someone and they dumped me and I would dump me too. Right? Like, it's like, I haven't seen you in so long. And so I was like, I need to change from a person that lives on airplanes to a person that lives somewhere. And so my friend was like, let's try starting a company together. And he had this idea. And then I changed it so it would work better. And like, we're like, okay, let's do this. And I started fundraising and I started doing all these things. But it turned out, so when you start a company with someone, it's like you're getting married. It's really big commitment. And it's like a multi-year commitment. And turned out we didn't know each other as well as we thought. And so he like kind of wanted to go this way and I kind of wanted to go that way. And it wasn't like he's wrong and I'm right. It was like, he's like, no, this makes sense. And I'm like, no, that won't work because of this. And he's like, no, it will because of that. And I'm like, no, but blah, blah. And then it was just like, we should end this now before we're having wrestling matches over this, right? And so then, we quit and I was like, what am I going to do next? And lots of people are like, come do AppSec for us. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that, but I really want to start something. And so I thought about the things I wanted to accomplish. And so in my life, it's important to me that I perform good, like Superman performs good. So that's part of my life that, like, if I'm going to do something, it's important that I do something that is good. And so I was like, okay, so anything you do in security, you're performing good, right? Because you're helping protect people. But I'm like, what else could I do? I bet I could do more. And so people were like, hey, could I, like, while you're unemployed and not sure what you're doing, could you come train our devs? And I was like, okay, yeah. And then I love public speaking, obviously. And then someone was like, this woman named Karen, who I really like, she took me aside and she's like, okay, Tanya, this is what I want you to do. I want you to make courses about how you do AppSec because I want to do AppSec how you do it. Can you do that? Because then lots of us could buy it and it could cost less. And I was like, oh, that's like a great idea. So I did a minimal viable product and me and one of my friends filmed it and I did it and both of us edited it. And then I sold over 100.
Nice.
And it's like, oh, and we did not know what we were doing, Tyrone. I was like, I've never really done this before. And so then we learned a lot and then we refilmed it and made it like with a better camera and actual lighting. I didn't look like I'm dead. It was like moving words, things on the screen, like fancy downloads, all this stuff. And then I opened an academy and I opened the community and I did all the things, but I didn't really realize that could help so many people because then we started a thing where when you graduate, we would introduce you for jobs. And so our AppSec program, over 100 people have gotten jobs in the field. Lots of people still haven't graduated yet. And I'm like, I'm not going to introduce you for jobs if you're not going to finish the course, dude.
Good.
Tough. But so like, I feel that's a good thing, if that makes sense. Like teaching's good, but like helping people break into the industry, helping people find their way, So the entrepreneurial journey was a lot about how can I perform good and still afford to perform good.
Mhm.
And it turns out performing good can actually be pretty profitable.
Yes, you touched on some really good points. In every entrepreneurial journey, you have your highs, you have your pitfalls. Um, what was rock bottom like for you? And,
Um,
how would
I
you
wouldn't say
describe your rock bottom? It's rock bottom's different for everyone.
I wouldn't say like I feel like I've been ridiculously lucky because I don't feel there was any rock bottom. Like a couple times I had to take money out of my own account in order to pay employees
Mhm.
because we'd miscalculated some stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I never didn't have enough, if that makes
Okay.
sense. Cause like I knew I was gonna work at a startup and I wasn't gonna make money for a while. So I on
Mhm.
purpose, like I moved into an apartment and downsized and made it so my life wouldn't cost very much. And it sounds nuts, but me growing my own food, like life is pretty cheap when
Okay.
all your vegetables are free and you're a weirdo that really likes to eat vegetables. But I would say there were some things where they were like things that didn't work. So like a thing that I tried and I worked really hard on and just kept not working is like I kept trying to work with different companies where I was like, I'll make a course about your product if you'll just pay for my time to make the course,
Mm-hmm.
and then the course will be free for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And like we would have meetings and meetings and meetings and never did anything happen except for with Neurolegion. Neurolegion did it. But like everyone else, I was just like, I just want you to pay for my time so I'm not working for free, right? But like not like this huge profit on top, just like so I can afford to make the class free. Because Tyrone, think about it, like most of the AppSec or even security tools cost a ton. And when you work at an enterprise, they want you to work with these fancy tools. So you've never seen them before. So the only way to get experience is to work at a job where they have that tool. But what if you don't have a job yet and you need to learn the thing? And I'm just like, ugh. Like if someone wants to become a SOC analyst and they could have hands-on experience with a bunch of different SIMs, that would be amazing. And like, I just kept pursuing it. I talked to so many companies and like, we estimate that we waste a lot of time. And almost every company was like, why would we pay you to make a course? I'm like, because I saw your courses and they suck. It's like, no, but it'll be like, and then you click there. and I was just like, I'll make it fun and exciting so people enjoy it, right? And also, I'll make it free and host it on my platform. So it's not about you making it's like a more neutral party. And just, all like, I don't know how to explain, but like, I wasted a lot, like months, like at least 6 months on that. And then I also like had some companies try to bully us because we're so small. So I was speaking at a conference. I was accepted to speak at a conference, and a company that runs this conference, I'm not going to tell you what they're called, but basically the company runs this conference, and they were negotiating with me to do like paid training on their product. Right. And so then the organizer of the conference was like, hey, so you're going to do that workshop at the conference. And I was like, okay, sure. Like if that's where you want it. And I was like, but this is still paid. And he was like, no, you have to do it free. And he's like, well, Jim Manico's doing one for free. And this other person's doing one for free. And I was like, do I look like Jim?
Yeah.
No, I don't. And Jim's in charge of Jim. And Jim's awesome. He's my friend. And that's cool. He can afford to do that for free. I can't. So you need to pay me for my time. And he's like, well, if you won't do it, then maybe you're not going to have that speaking gig anymore. And I was like, you've been advertising my name for like 10 weeks. I'm the most famous person speaking at your shitty little conference. Right? And he's like, well, you could do it for the exposure. I'm like, it's weird. My mortgage broker doesn't accept exposure bucks.
Yes.
And he was just like, well, maybe there won't be space for you. So the next day he emails me and he's like, oh, sorry, there's no space for you on the schedule anymore. And so I wrote back and I said, oh, are you sure there's not space? Let me know, because if not, you're going to hear from my lawyer because you've been using my likeness and my name to promote your event for 10 weeks. And we have a signed contract, buddy. And so I'll talk to you about how much it costs then. My lawyer can reach out to you. Should he talk to you, or would you like him to talk to your legal department? And I was like, you have 24 hours to respond. And then he, like 5 minutes later, oops, sorry, there is a spot, misunderstanding. I'm like, yeah, there's a fucking misunderstanding.
That's
right.
And
yeah, I had things like that happen. If I had one conference, I kid you not, Tyrone. So we were in talks for them to pay me to speak at their conference, like as a keynote speaker. Then the talks sort of dropped off, but they were advertising my name. And I was like, I guess I'm still speaking. You know what they did? They took a video of me from YouTube and they played it and pretended I was at their conference.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is a big company. And I wrote them and I was like, there's been a misunderstanding here. And so it turned out that it was an employee that had done that and had told them I was there, and that person doesn't work there anymore. And they're like, we are so sorry. Please don't sue the pants off of us. I was like, please don't do that again. Like,
yes.
Like so playing a video and pretending I'm live without my consent. Like, what are you doing?
So that confidence, I like it, right? I imagine it may not have been there the whole time. Do you remember like the moment, or do you remember what it took for you to finally get that confidence in yourself and realize who you are and be like, this is me, I'm Tanya, like, this is my rates, like, this is it. Do you remember?
So the rates, definitely no. I'm still working on that. But I've always been a pretty confident person. But you know what? With rates, I've had a lot of problems with that. I got offered a job somewhere, and I'm not going to say the name of the place, but they hired me because I'm an influencer. And then they hired a tall, good-looking white dude who's an influencer. And they hired him first, and then they're hiring me. And they're like, how much do you want to be paid? I'm like, I want to be paid what he's being paid. And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be paid what the man's being paid. I'm worth what he's worth. And he's more famous than me. He has like 3 times more followers than I do. And they're just like, stop being ridiculous. And I was like, no, like, I'm great and I'm worth that. And he's under NDA. So he couldn't tell me, but he's like, ask for the moon. and I was like, I want a lot. And they're like, you need to name a number. I'm like, you name a number. And we went back and forth. It was so silly, Tyrone. We went back and forth for like 5 weeks. And finally I was like, I want 40,000 American dollars. And they're like, cool, sign here. And I was like, and I think they were thinking like 6 figures. And I just like super lowballed myself. But to me, I was like, I can't believe I'm getting paid $40,000. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yes.
And
I love it.
So, yeah. So if we do another gig like that next year, I think I'm going to ask for more. And it's so funny because the other influencer, he's like, you think $40,000 is the moon? I'm like, yes.
What would you say to other people who may be lacking confidence?
Okay. So whenever I feel insecure about something, I go and I learn the thing inside and out. So for this, when I didn't know how much to charge, I called all my professional mentors. So I have a few professional mentors and I asked them and they all gave me advice. And then I asked other influencer type people, like, how much do you charge? And then all of them were like, I don't know, 40,000 seems like a really good thing to ask, like to agree to do, like, you know, it's like a list of, like a list of stuff they wanted done. And they're like, to me, that's crazy that you would get paid that much for that. And they're like, really, they're just paying to have your name on a thing, right? I'm like, I know, and I don't understand what my name is worth, right? Like, and it can be hard to understand because like when I was a musician, I would perform in every bar, and all my drinks were free. And like if bands were playing, there's a concert, you need a ticket. I didn't need a ticket because it's like, I worked here last night, come on, right? And there's sort of that thing. And so I remember someone saying like, oh, how much is beer here? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And they're like, but you're holding a beer. And I'm like, oh, I I don't pay. And they were just like looking at me. They're like, you come here every week and you've never paid. I'm like, no.
Because
I show up with 10 people.
Yeah.
Because I show up with a posse. Because like people are like I'm entertaining everyone and joking and playing songs for them and doing this and doing that. And like it makes sense for the bar to have me there. And so like it sounds weird, but now like it's like, how much is that worth? Is it worth a free beer? Is it worth a free glass of wine? When I was at Black Hat, so Tyrone, before anyone knew who I was, I went to DEF CON one year and to like check it out. And I went to a Black Hat party and I was wearing this super sexy red dress. That is like, quite frankly, one size too small.
Uh-huh.
And it's a sausage party. There's like 4 zillion dudes at this party. And there's one other woman and she's not dressed flirtatiously like I was. Okay. She's dressed like a normal person. So she's wearing like a t-shirt and jeans. She looks good, but she's not provocative. And I'm wearing a fire engine red dress. I'm being provocative. And
was that by design?
Goes up to me, oh yeah. Well, I like looking nice. And so she comes up and she's like, yeah, so I didn't see you at the Black Hat thing. I'm like, oh, I don't have a ticket to Black Hat. I have a ticket to DEF CON. And she's like, so why are you at the Black Hat party? I'm like, there's free booze. And I'm like, and it's like about this. And when I signed up for the ticket, it said it was a Black Hat event. It did not say you needed a ticket to get in. So I'm not actually breaking the rules. And she's like, this is for Black Hat attendees. And I was like, okay. And then I'm going to tell everyone I'm leaving and all the men are going to follow me. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be like, I'm being kicked out. Who's coming with me? And they're all going to come with me. I'm like, do you want me to leave? She's like, what are you drinking? Because I'm going to get you another drink. You stay.
Make it a double.
Like, thanks.
Oh, man.
And then I got to talk to lots of people and it was great. And then I drank too much and I had to go back to my hotel room and drink water.
So it's been what, a couple decades for you in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like so this is about mentorship. So it's like a 2-part question. One, when did you feel like you were ready to provide mentorship? And are you providing mentorship to folks now?
Cool. This is such a good question. So I started, let me back up. So most of my uncles and both aunts are computer scientists. My dad was a computer technologist. And so everyone was programming all the time. So when I decided to do computer science, they were like, yeah, obviously, what else would you study? Hello. You know, like if your dad's a doctor and your mom's a doctor and both their parents are doctors, and then you're like, oh, I'm thinking about going to medicine school. They're like, yeah, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So it was like the obvious choice. So I didn't really feel I needed a mentor because everyone I know programmed, if that makes sense. And so, but when I switched to security, you know, it was this ethical hacker that showed me how to hack one of my apps. And we became friends, and he was in a band and I was in a band. So obviously our bands had to play together because that's what you do. And we became fast friends. And he was like, after a year, he's like, I was never going to mentor anyone again, but I want you to become my apprentice. And I was like, me? And he's like, Tanya, come on. He's like, you're exceptional. You'll be so amazing. And so for a year, I did this apprenticeship with him. And then he offered me a job. And I said, yes. And then I got tapped to lead Canada's Red Team. So Canada has a red team that attacks our military and other things, and it participates in the hacker games with the other Five Eyes countries. And like, that's a ridiculously prestigious job. And I was super nervous, but I said yes. And then my professional mentor told me he hated me and I'm an asshole.
Wow.
Yeah. And he started trash talking me to anyone who would listen. And he trash talked me so much they rescinded the job. Yeah. Wow. I got told by someone in the military, I better not show up because it's not going to go well. Yeah. And so that was awful. Yeah.
What
it was
made
very
him go
bad.
What made him go from like mentorship to being a hater?
Because I was supposed to work for him.
Oh.
And I didn't know that was an unsaid agreement that I had never made. And like, And like I had accepted the job with him, and then I accepted a different job instead. But the job with him wasn't supposed to start for a year or two because he has a small business, and he's like, I need to afford you. So like, let's plan in the next 12 to 18 months. And so I was like, well, I can lead the red team for 12 to 18 months and get great experience. And he was just like, go to hell. I never want to speak to you again. And I was like really upset because I thought this person was my friend. And so then I was like, I need a new professional mentor. So I was the OWASP chapter leader. So I started a mentoring program for all of OWASP so that I could find a mentor, because that is how I do things. And so then Adrian was my new mentor. He's a SANS instructor, Adrian de Beaupre. And so I was like, will you please come? And he's like, yes, of course I will. And then like near the end of the event, I'm like, will you be my professional mentor? He's like, you didn't have to do all of this. I would have said yes. We're friends. I think you're awesome. And like he got me my first spot speaking at a conference, and he actually stood next to me on stage. I was so nervous. I'm like, I'm gonna freaking die. He's like, you literally can't die of this. I'm like, no, I can. And so he actually stood on stage with me, which is like really nice, right?
Yes.
And he was just so encouraging, and he'd meet with me every month and go over each thing and help me. And if I got stuck with a technical problem, he'd help me. And then Sharif Kusa became another one. And so when we did this professional mentor thing, so I found 10 people who were willing to be people's mentors for this event. And we did like kind of like speed dating sort of where you meet all these mentees and mentors. And so I was like, I'm going to mentor one person. And I already knew her, and she already wanted to do that. And she was my student. And so I was like, then, at this event, I can be a mentor, but I'll just choose you. And then I had a lineup, Tyrone, of people who wanted to meet me and wanted me to be their mentor. And I'm like, me? And they're like, nah, you're ready. I saw you talk about this thing, and you did this, and you're leading this community. And I was like, no, not me. I'm not ready. And they're like, yeah. And so I ended up with 4 women that I was mentoring. And then I ended up mentoring 2, I want to say boys because they're only like 19, but technically adults. And like, then more people and more people. And basically sometimes you meet that special person and you see this potential in them that they don't see in themselves.
Yes, I see it all the time.
Right? And it's like, you're ridiculously awesome. How have you not got the memo?
Yeah.
And so some of my some of my mentees now have like spoken at international conferences. Some of them have keynoted. Some of them have regular blogs. Some of them like left their job and went into developer relations or started their own companies. And it's just like, I'm so proud of you.
Yes. I know that feeling.
And I learn from them too, if that makes sense. And so like they can call me whenever they want to. And like one of them, he just moved into AppSec, and I'm so proud of him. And like one of them, she just got onto a board of directors, and it's just like, so I didn't know I was ready. Other people told me I was ready. I think that's the thing, is that other people asked me to be their mentor. And I guess that meant I was ready, whether I knew it or not, which is not a great answer. I know.
No, I get it. And shout out to Adrian and the mentor for believing you.
Yeah, and Sharif.
Believing in you. It's clear, right? And screw that other guy. It sounds like he meant to use you, right?
He's done that to a bunch of people. So like he's been in the scene in that city for a long time, and then several people were like, oh, he did that thing where then he burns you to the ground after. Yes, you're like the 8th victim. Apparently, I'm the only person that ever graduated from his hellish apprenticeship program, because like he made me read the entire Shell Hackers Handbook and do the whole thing myself. He like got me to learn Burp Suite over the weekend by myself with no training, and then do a real pen test on prod the next week. Like it was like, I'm going to throw you in the middle of the ocean and you can just swim or die. Like it was really hard. And then I did stuff with Adrian, and then it was just like, oh my God, this is so much easier. He's like, yeah, I'm not here to torture you. I want to see you succeed. And so like, if I'd ask him a question, he'd be like, did you ask Google first? because you better have asked Google first. I'm like, yeah, I have researched this for a day before I annoy you with this question. He's like, okay, let's do it then. And then he would like help me. Like sometimes he would suss out the problem and be like, do you see the answer now? And sometimes he's like, I'm just going to tell you the name of the tool that does that. Right. And then he's like, you have to, and here's a link. And so like, go learn it. Right. And kind of breadcrumbs so that I'd have to figure things out. And it was really great. And like, I mean, he is a professional teacher, so it makes sense because he teaches for SANS. But yeah, it was just really great experience. And like knowing that even now I could call him and I could ask for advice and that he would totally give it to me. And when I started getting invites to speak in other countries, I was like, yeah, like I met this guy and he's Swiss and he wants me to come speak in Switzerland. And he said he'd send me plane tickets and get me a hotel. Like, is this dude crazy? Doesn't he know that I'm not famous? And he's like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, then do it. And so I took like all my vacation time, just flying around the world, speaking at conferences. And I'm like, I'm not making any money at this and I'm blowing all my vacation time. And he's like, sometimes you got to do the thing that makes you happy and that you're passionate about, and the money will just kind of follow you. And then Microsoft called and they're like, hey, we need someone for DevRel. I'm like, what the heck is that? They're like, it's that thing you've been doing for free. Would you like to do it for us, but get paid? I was like, shut up. You're making that up. That's not real.
But I'm going to ask for the moon.
He literally, the Microsoft guy was like, no, this is a real job. I swear. I'm not screwing with you. I thought he was kidding.
Yeah. Mentors are definitely there. They're supposed to help you and ensure that you succeed, whether it's with them or not, right? That's the whole point. Another question. In an alternate universe, right? If you weren't doing AppSec, weren't into tech, what would you be doing?
Oh, I was going to say some other tech. Damn. So I really like farming. And I mean, if you don't have a mortgage, you could do that and live off of it in Canada. But I am going to have a gigantic long-term relationship with this bank. So, but yeah, someone just put in the chat, like musician and like farmer and maybe like, it sounds weird, but like, can you be a professional community leader? Do you know what I mean? Like, can you be the person that, honestly, I almost became a politician when I was younger, but like at the municipal level. And actually my significant other used to be the mayor of a little tiny town near here. And that was like this really amazing experience to be able to like, basically like you get to work with the community all the time and like do awesome, positive things. And I'm like, because like when you see like politicians like that lead countries, it's different. But if you're a municipal politician, you can do things like where I used to live in Ottawa, my neighborhood had this big field, and once a week, all summer, OSINT challenge. I used to live in Ottawa. And I used to live in Centertown, which is right downtown. And there's this big field, and they would once a week rent this huge screen, and then they would show old movies for free. And families would come and couples would go on dates, and you just bring a blanket and you sit down and you would just meet other people and talk with them. And even during COVID, right? Like as long as you're X amount apart, you could still do this community event and be with other people. And it was really nice. And like, then they would have all these art shows and farmers markets and things like that. And it's like this great way to just meet other humans. I really like other humans. I'm very extroverted. And so, yeah, I could see myself trying to see if I could become a politician so that I could do all of those things, but then still receive a paycheck. But municipal, I don't know if you know, but municipal politicians generally, they get paid a way less than tech. Like they get paid social worker pay. Social workers do really, really important work and get really awful crappy pay. And so like, I think my significant other got paid $21,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's not really pay, right? That's like a, thanks. for showing up. You're cool.
Yeah. One final question. We do this thing in our Breaking into Cyber meetups called Speaking into Existence, because I feel like things change in your brain when your brain hears you say something, right? You know how you just, sometimes you think about things, and you're like, I'm going to do that. But for your brain to hear you say it, I feel like there's a new level of motivation that occurs. So, an opportunity for you to speak something into existence. Do you have a goal or a plan or something that you want to accomplish that you haven't accomplished yet and you would like to speak it into existence?
Okay, so first of all, I love this so much. Tyrone, you're so great. My significant other has a huge crush on you. What? Like, you're just, yeah. Oh, yeah. After watching the podcast, my significant other like brings you up. Like, have you spoken to Tyrone lately? How's that dude doing? So awesome. Like, I don't know how to explain, but like, thanks. Yeah, your episode's one of like the best episodes that we had. Like, legit, for real. Don't tell the others. So a thing that I want to speak into existence. So after I move, I want to take like 3 months to like get used to, you live here now, because it's like it's over an hour away from where so I don't know my way around. I don't know anything about this place. But after that, I want to start writing my next book, Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding. Oh. I don't know where I went. There I am.
Yeah, I was trying to highlight just you. So when
I know I do that. But I really want to write my next book. And so I'm going to start this summer, like wireframing it. And then I always poll everyone and ask, like, I'm going to cover these things. Have I missed anything you want to see in this book? And then I'm going to start my research, and then I'm going to write it, which is the fun part. And then I'm going to edit it, which is the hellish, awful, terrible part that takes twice as long as writing. And then hopefully release it in like the next 2 years. So that is a huge goal that I have. And so because I've said it out loud now, maybe I have to do it.
Oh, yeah. It's going to happen.
It sounds weird.
It's going to happen. Yeah. We'll be waiting for it. We'll support, of course. Yeah. Anything else you want to say to the audience?
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for coming. So all the people who are on this call, you could have literally done anything you want with your day. And you chose to spend it, like 2 hours of it, with me and Tyrone. And I really appreciate that. Because Tyrone, there's like 5 zillion online things right now, right? And like, and it's distracting, and there's so many to choose from. It can be overwhelming. So I really appreciate all of you choosing us today. Thank you.
Yes. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank everyone in the audience for being here. I want to thank my team for putting this together. This actually makes, 10 years for us. We started in January of 2012. We're at 9,000 members, and you were my very first one-on-one interview. So we're going to try to do something new with the streaming and having these presentations live. So I appreciate you for doing this.
Thank you really for having me.
Really good. We're going to put
this was really
We're going to put all the links from the presentation inside the summary. I want to thank you all for coming out. The next one will be in 2 weeks. I'm going to do another Breaking into Cyber, and in there, I'm going to allow the audience to interview me. AMA style, ask me anything style. So if you wanted to come on, you can. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a Speak It into Existence session again. So anyone in the audience who would like to speak it into existence, I'll send you the link to the stream. You can come up so people can see you, right? And you can speak it into existence, and we'll support and see how things are going with your goals and milestones. So it has been 2 hours. I think we're exactly on the 2-hour mark. This was really, really fun. I would love to do it again. Maybe, 4 months from now, 5, 6 months from now. Yeah. So thank you, Tanya. Thank you, crowd. Thank you, everyone. And have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Bye. Thanks for joining us.